We've invested in probably maybe 44 or so Bitcoin startups or Bitcoin only companies in the group. And there is a new form of fundraising that is called equity crowdfunding.
How can the barriers of entry to investing in Bitcoin startups be lowered? That's the conversation that we explore today with Mike Jarmuz, founder of Lightning Ventures and Thunder Funder. We hope you enjoy, and as a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only. None of what is covered should be construed as investment advice. Lynn and Israel are partners at Base Layer Advisors, where they employ their strong network of venture capital partners and startups to connect investors with unique opportunities within the Bitcoin innovation space. Alongside this, they support founders with their strategic growth and fundraising goals. Visit our website's advisory section to learn more. Welcome to Build with Bitcoin. I'm co-host Israel Munoz, joined with co-host Lynn Bairstow. Today, we are happy to have this conversation with Muzz, founder of Thunder Funder and Lightning Ventures. Muzz, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's long overdue. I remember when we had our first conversation, I stumbled on your channel and I'm like, this is so cool. And you guys were talking about a lot of other stuff, right? It wasn't just about BIPs and, OpCat. It was also about what it's like to be a founder and going through their journey, and lots of really cool topics that I resonated with and thought it was awesome. And then I was just bugging the heck out of you guys, right? I got to get on there. And then finally, I guess, you let me on. So thanks.
You've been on our list for a while, Mike. And so, it's like, I know we've always looked at what you're doing is, the podcast features both the founders and the investors, but you're really bringing a democratization to the ability to invest in Bitcoin startups. And so we're really excited to talk to you today because rather than being the super high minimums and institutional size investments that a venture fund has, or even angel investors, which you are, and we want to talk about that, kind of bringing the angel investment level to a larger group of people who want to participate in the Bitcoin ecosystem beyond just holding the asset itself. So, to get started, we always like to get as a starting point why, how somebody was introduced to Bitcoin. I know you've talked about this in the past, but most importantly, it's like, why is Bitcoin important to you? And from the time that you were introduced to it, what was it about it that kind of clicked with you that said, hey, I got to spend more of my time and energy here?
Well, coming out of the 2008 crisis, at least, I'm 42, but, going through that, as an adult and kind of reevaluating money, and what is hard money, and, falling into the gold and silver, sort of the metals route, I think is the natural, way that people go. And then it's all of those podcasts, right? With the gold and silver bugs, and, really sort of embraced that after, 2008. And then, somehow if you're a conspiracy theorist or a nut job, like I was and still am, you end up in some message forums and on some websites, and, someone mentions Bitcoin and you do what everyone does the first time somebody, tells you about Bitcoin. And that is you dismiss it, as a scam or a Ponzi scheme or something that is just really not going to work. And then it's that amount of time that's passed between when you first dismiss it to when you buy some. That is like the most important period. So I think it showed up on a website and I did just that. Didn't really pay much attention to it. But I was really into the hard money and starting to learn as much as I could for my own personal finances. And then somebody said, hey, you got to check this guy out. His name's Max Kaiser. This is really cool. He's got this show. And that's where, I heard it mentioned again. And it wasn't very expensive then. And I took another look at it and it was like, holy cow. This is cool. Not even just calculating how much it was before, but how much it was then. And there was this New York Bitcoin Center that was down around the Wall Street area where they had like this open outcry sort of pit or whatever down there. And Nick Spanos, that was his thing then. And they were very welcoming people where you could kind of walk in the door and they would give you enough information to basically make you obsessed, and that's what it is. You just give somebody just enough knowledge, kind of like it is right now with AI, right? If you're discovering AI, you just need enough to where you stay up till 3-4 o'clock in the morning and your wife is screaming, what are you doing in there? You have to come to bed, but you just have to get that much. So I got that much. And then I really just, embraced it as much as I could. And you know how it is. You read Mastering Bitcoin, the Antonopoulos book. I'm not an engineer or very technical, but you do as best as you can going through that and learning as much as you can. And I also owned a bar in New York at that time, and we put a Bitcoin ATM in. It was the second one in Manhattan at the time. And it was a homemade thing. This is pre-bit license and all of that. And there were some characters that were coming in to use that Bitcoin ATM because, they put you on a website and people were coming in with hundreds of dollars of bills just stacked, just hundreds, to where the bill acceptor was actually full all the time. So I think it was a little bit of a different Bitcoin crowd than we have right now. But that was certainly fun to watch. And we accepted Bitcoin at the bar. We even had a price ticker on one of the screens. I think the only website back then really where you could watch it was Bitcoin Wisdom. I don't even know if that's still a site anymore, but that was the real website where you could track it. And, kind of like now, not many people pay or use Bitcoin. Some do, I guess at a conference, more so, even as a novelty, maybe in El Salvador. But not a lot of people used it. But we certainly did accept it at the time. And that was really that first sort of, 2013, 2014 kind of, area that was a lot of fun. And Bitcoin is kind of like, you can't unknow it, right? Has there ever been somebody who gets into Bitcoin and then is like, yeah, I really researched Bitcoin and like, I'm done with it. I'm going back to fiat. So you never really are the same once that happens. So I wasn't really angel investing then. I didn't start till a few years later. I was doing other things. I was kind of always employed for myself. I mean, I was in the music business for a good 10 or so years. I managed a band on Elektra Records. I was a concert promoter. I did a lot of interesting things in life. And then I wish that was my biggest regret is I wish that I got into full-time Bitcoin a lot sooner than I did. But that's a little bit about my Bitcoin journey.
And then the angel investing, because that ties so much into what you're doing today and the companies that you're leading. How did you get into angel investing? And were the early investments just traditional tech companies? And then how did that kind of segue into Bitcoin companies?
Well, I don't know if you can tell, but my MBA is from Brown. Okay. So yeah, no pedigree here, in any way, just self-taught. And, I was convinced that really all the real money was made in the private markets. And I just wanted to find out as much as I could about the private markets. How do they work? How do I participate, from somebody that really knew nothing about it? And then you start to learn about all these hurdles and the accredited investor sort of thing, and then getting access and deal flow. And there was that Jason Calacanis book. Now, love him or hate him, okay, he is what he is. But if you read the Angel book that he wrote, if you read that book, it's a very easy read. It's probably only maybe 200 pages. If you're not excited about investing in early stage companies after reading that book, there's something wrong with you. because when you start to see sort of the returns on something like an Uber or a Facebook, yeah, these are outliers, but just really kind of the founder experience and everything that you go through, I just thought it was great and I was hooked. But I didn't want to invest in early stage companies because I was more scared about losing all my money. And that's what happens when you invest in early stage. So I focused on later stage, kind of pre-IPO sort of startups, with, maybe the minimums were 10,000. But you could invest in an Uber or an Airbnb, Spotify, Pinterest, Slack, all of these companies that have now since IPO'd. You could invest then at the later stage because, a company that's worth $600 million probably isn't going to zero. Probably, although it does happen. You might not have like, the best exit ever, but you certainly get some experience, right? I remember getting your first IPO, getting those shares, seeing them show up in your account, and then you start learning all the things that you have to learn as far as lockup periods, direct listings and SPACs, traditional IPOs, all of this stuff, right? So I focused really on the later stage stuff. And we had a pretty robust IPO market at that time, where your money wasn't tied up for that long. It wasn't like you have to wait 7 to 10 years and then you have the big exit. I mean, some of these, it was like 10 to 20 months, and you were able to ring the register with an IPO. And that's usually what I always did. My default rule was the minute that I could sell, I did, and I just redeployed it into new stuff. And I did that for a while and it was going great until, of course, everything melted down and the world ended. But it was great for a little while there.
Well, it's funny you mentioned a little bit ago, one of your only regrets is not getting into Bitcoin earlier, right? And I feel like even just a few years from now, we'll be hearing similar stories, and people still, are not necessarily waking up to the fact that we are still, despite very understandable your regret, we are still extremely early, especially in this private company space that you're of course focused on at ThunderFunder and Lightning Ventures. So from your experience of first getting to know private markets, Muzz, learning a little bit about, kind of that risk curve in a company's growth. At what point did you decide there's a gap here with early stage Bitcoin companies that I need to fill, or why these two investment vehicles?
So most of the first investments that I made during a lot of the learning and obsession period early on was in all those later stage companies, and I did no early stage deals. And I met someone at a conference and I was showing them, kind of what I was doing and my portfolio and some of the exits. And that's when they said, listen, if you want to do this, you got to get into the early stage stuff. You just need to get over kind of the fears. And that's really where you're going to get the best returns, So, I didn't have an AngelList account. I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't really have these type of syndicates. Where I was investing were sort of later stage secondary platforms and, a few other syndicates, but not like what AngelList does, with, hundreds and the ability to run a group on there. So, then I really joined them, and that's when it was like, oh my gosh, everything it's the Klarna of Latin America, it's the Uber of XYZ country. And that's when just the deals really started, coming in. And the good thing is the check sizes go down. Because you just wanted to, I had like a hyper diversified thesis of, I joked, it's called a piker, is a person who makes small bets is what that word. So my friends would call me the piker, king, because you can invest such a small amount, into literally 2,000 companies, and just see what happens. And then you get updates from the founders. You kind of learn as much as you can. You read everything that you can, and, you archive that and you save it, and you can even go back and read even something that didn't didn't work out, right? If you invested $2,000 in a company, and maybe you got 5 updates from them and then it dissolved, or maybe you got half your money back, you can like watch the story of what happened. It's the best thing. It just came out of YC. It's oversubscribed. It's this and that. And, you have that. And then you have the, well, we had a little delay. We had a little trouble hiring. There was a extra regulation. We didn't account for this. And then it was, oh my God, COVID and blah, 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 and like, and you get to kind of go back and do a post-mortem on all of these things and see what didn't work. And there's definitely a lot of learnings that come from that. So I was in that land, and there's not like a ton of value that I can add for drone deliveries in Dubai, but you try to be as helpful as you can, and that is something also that you notice with early stage that's cool, is the founders will respond to you. If it's a $10 million kind of pre-seed or seed company, and you have anything from a bug fix on their website, or like, hey, have you ever like seen this company? They're doing something kind of similar, and maybe there's some symmetry there. Always you get a response, and they're thankful. And in the public or later stage markets, nobody's going to respond. Nobody cares what you think. And that was pretty cool going through that. And some friends that I had after the first Bitcoin conference, I think here in Miami, in 2021, they said, listen, why don't you're in 400 syndicates, you love this. It's all you do. Why don't you start your own little shop? Why don't you kind of do your own thing? And, maybe you can raise a small fund and, syndicate some extra allocations. And why don't you do what these guys do? 'Cause you get to see it from the other side, what people are doing well, what they don't do well. Information updates, are they helpful, just everything that they're doing or how they choose to run their group. So that's what I did. I raised a small fund. It was friends and family, and started cutting small checks into Bitcoin startups, Bitcoin only. And at the same time started syndicating extra allocations. And it was a pretty good market then, where you could raise a few $100,000 fairly easily. My focus was to get a bunch of really great people into the group. It's not necessarily about, if Lynn's in our group and she's seen 13 deals and she hasn't invested in any. I mean, personally, I don't care. It's just having really great people that are able to support the companies, and a lot of good comes from it, right? Maybe ex-founders are in there, or other operators, or just having great people kind of see the deals that you're doing. It leads to sometimes them getting advisor shares, or me connecting them with the founders directly. It's just like having that community sort of network and like fostering that. So we started syndicating those deals, building up the syndicate. And then we were still deploying, from that fund. And that was it as far as my own personal investing into other startups. I didn't do any other investments. Very rarely, maybe a couple little follow-ons, but I didn't even open the emails for anything else as far as other stuff goes. I was just focused on Bitcoin, and that's still where I'm at now. And I love it. It's the most important thing on the planet. And I'm not really thinking about some medical device breakthrough for something.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because you really identified the opportunity that Bitcoin is more than an asset or a token, but it's also technology, and the companies building on it are important to increasing its use and adoption, and they need support too. So translating that experience you had as an angel investor and other tech to seeing what could possibly happen with these companies that are, creating the infrastructure for Bitcoin today is, I mean, you were just very early to doing that, and doing it in a way that really brought along the ability to create community around it too. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about, I mean, we've been talking broadly, but you have Lightning Ventures and Thunder Funder, and Thunder Funder is your newer offering. Can you describe what the two platforms are and who are they accessible to, and maybe the differentiators between the two of them?
Sure. And and also, when you think about the like sort of internet boom and the PC and kind of what we went through from like, I don't know, Windows 95 to the first Netscape browser, that whole world, there was a number of things that you could invest in, right? If the internet was a token, it wasn't just about the internet. You had so many hardware manufacturers and ISPs and software and just a million different things that did really well in that boom. And that's kind of the thesis for where we're at with Bitcoin right now, is that if, Uber or Airbnb are going to accept Bitcoin, what are they going to do? We've probably invested in all the companies they could choose to do that. But that's kind of the play. It's everything happening on, around, or with Bitcoin in every way. So Lightning Ventures is for accredited investors, which I am vehemently against, and I think is probably the biggest scam ever. Just a gatekeeper to keep people out. It is absolutely terrible. It makes no logical sense compared to all the things that you can do very legally without any sort of sophistication or hurdle, like losing your life savings on a hand of blackjack. That is fine. But if you wanted to invest $1,000 and start 9, no, we must protect you. It makes no sense. It's terrible. And it's probably because like the government hates you. And there's a tremendous amount of wealth that can be made in this area when it does what it's supposed to do, and when you're right. That is, I hope it changes. There's all this talk about Trump potentially doing some sort of test or changing the rules. There's other ways you can qualify for an accredited investor right now. You could have a Series 7, I think, or a 65, if you happen to have that. If you have some sort of experience working with an investing company, it's not even very specific what that experience is. Of course, if you have $1 million, or if you've made I think it's $200,000 in the past year, and you have the expectation of making it in the current year. And it's a self-certification process where you just click the button, and that's pretty much it. And that's the way it is by design, actually. So Lightning Ventures and Reg D offerings, these are 506Bs and 506Cs, are these type of offerings, are for accredited investors. And there are certain rules that you can't advertise them. 506Bs, you can't advertise. You can only have a certain amount of investors in every deal. You can only raise a certain amount of money for every deal. And these are what people refer to as SPVs, or special purpose vehicles, that are created for the sole purpose of investing in that one company. That one fundraise. So that is what we do at Lightning Ventures. And I think we've deployed maybe around $10 million or slightly over through the fund and our syndicates there. We've invested in probably maybe 44 or so Bitcoin startups or Bitcoin only companies in the group. And there is a new form of fundraising that is called equity crowdfunding. Okay. Crowdfunding is a messy word, because people think of crowdfunding and it's GoFundMe or, Patreon or Kickstarter or Geyser, also a portfolio company. And crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, is actually raising real investments. These are real equity with similar okay, type of instruments that you would have on the private side. Okay, they work almost the same, but where the retail investor can actually participate on maybe not quite the same terms, but very close terms that the VCs or other people would. So this came about in the Jobs Act, which was like jumpstart our small business, something like that. And Obama in I think 2012 or 13. And the first company was actually WeFunder. They kind of led the charge and came out and said, we're going to do this. So this was important because up until then, as a founder, you could not raise from unaccredited investors. So it helps the founders too, because you can leverage your fans and people who love your company. And, through this bureaucratic sort of tool that I am now navigating myself firsthand, let me tell you, not easy. But if you go through this route, you can raise money from retail investors for maybe even as low as $100 or a few $100s. So there's been some famous companies that did some pretty big Reg CF rounds, like what is that big mailer company? It's a publishing.
MailChimp or
No, it's a publishing platform where you put your blog out. But it's
Substack?
one. Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry, but they did a pretty big Reg CF round where you can, send out one email to everyone who uses your company and say, do you want to invest in us? And it's just a really cool way to leverage the people who love your company, right? And then you've created a new bond with your customers, and they are now your investors, and they are just that much more your biggest fan and your cheerleader. So that was the Reg CF that came about. Not easy, a lot of red tape, not fun. And there's been a few changes to that law over the years too, as far as how much you can invest. But basically it allows nearly anyone to invest in these companies and participate. So the goal, well, always my goal and passion, is to democratize this and to bring it to everyone, right? With Lightning Ventures, the minimum is always $1,000 for those accredited investors. So if you wanted to kind of get your feet wet investing in a few of these companies, you could for not much money. You can read updates from founders, see how you can be helpful, all that good stuff. But Thunder Funder is kind of like the next iteration of the next step further, where we can really open it up to almost anyone, globally even, to allow them to participate in this funding. So that's what we announced in July of last year at Bitcoin 24 in Nashville. And we're still babies. We're in our first year. We have 2 live deals on the platform right now, and we're just figuring it out.
Build with Bitcoin is a proud affiliate partner of River. River is a financial services company that allows you to purchase, sell, and transfer your Bitcoin all through a great suite of products, high security standards, and as of recent, even allowing you to earn a Bitcoin yield on your US dollar cash deposits. For a personalized onboarding experience, go to partner.river.com/buildwithbitcoin. I remember when you were speaking to all of that, I got to spend a summer in 2015. Are you familiar with Our Crowd? They're based
Oh, yes. That's the Israeli company.
Yeah.
They don't let U.S. investors
so
invest.
That must have changed. I know a few years ago they did. But back to your point, this can be a bit of a regulatory, confusing environment. I'm not sure what they do or don't do now as far as U.S. investors. But I mean, I did see the power of a lot of these things that you mentioned. Just the accessibility, having people who don't maybe have that massive check size, but still want to participate in these private markets, be able to go along for the ride. The community building aspect that you mentioned is just so powerful. I also saw how that they can be just, the promoters of that product or service naturally, because once they're, even if it's just $1,000 that you've invested in a private company, now it's, that's a small slice is yours, and the kind of ripple effects can be actually pretty profound and quite successful actually as well, by the way. But To all of this mission that you're speaking to, Mike, as far as kind of democratizing this accessibility to private markets, maybe it'd be great if we can just step back a little bit and help get your perspective for listeners on, why private companies, especially with, we were just kind of talking a little bit about this before we started recording the episode. There's so much going on right now with all these, meme coins and tokens, and, it's not an easy economic environment right now. So of course people want to participate in the growth of the economy. Everyone's looking to get ahead. And unfortunately, a lot of these other things can be full of scams and false utility, etc. Why for you is it important to distinguish this private company sector?
I definitely want to come back to the carried interest on the accredited side versus the Reg CF side, on the crowdfunding side, and just the plethora of things that you can invest in versus the smaller amount. Okay. And kind of how that works, because when you go on some of these platforms and you see hundreds of potential investments to be made versus if you're in Lightning Ventures and we have maybe one or two live deals, kind of how that works as far as what a numbers game is and what isn't. But why private companies? Well, if you thought that Airbnb was a cool idea, and invested 25 grand into their first round, I mean, at the IPO, I think that was worth like $1 billion. I had like the slide in a presentation. And a lot of these things, there aren't many places, or even like a Coinbase, right? As much as everybody hates them. If it was, 2013 and they just got out of YC and you liked Bitcoin and you had your deal flow up and somebody sends you a deal for Coinbase and you invested like $1,000, there was probably like $4 million at their IPO. Certainly seven figures for sure, right? Because there's dilution and there's all these things that are also kind of unknown. So there really aren't many places where you can get those sort of outsized returns. Yes, you could get them with Bitcoin over certain time periods. And there are Bitcoin startups that have outperformed the price of Bitcoin over certain time periods. Everyone's really excited because Fold just went public, and I got lucky. It was one of my it was an early angel investment. Had nothing to do with Lightning Ventures. It was before Lightning Ventures, but I sold a Bitcoin at 10,000 in October of 2020 to invest in Fold. And what happened since then? Well, the Bitcoin price ripped up and then it crashed again and then it sat around for a while, and kind of all of these things that happened, no decisions, and now Fold is public, right? And it hasn't all shaken out yet because there's a lockup period and there's everything else, right? Still couldn't sell it if I wanted to. But as of right now, that investment, 100%, probably 20 is much larger of a return than just having Bitcoin. And that goes the other way too, right? That goes the other way. That's a good example. It's nice to have a good example. There's plenty of not so good examples, as well. But, over a certain time period, and that is one of the most important parts about it, is the timing. Okay. Because, somebody wants to say right now, why should I invest in one of these Bitcoin startups when I can just buy Bitcoin? And if Bitcoin has a great week and is up 10%, these investments are never going to outperform the short term. In fact, you can't even really track it, until much later. Okay. But over a long enough time period and through different cycles and at different times, and a lot of that depends on the overall breadth of the market and how the major indexes are holding up and what the IPO market is like and everything else, it can certainly outperform. So I like to think about it as you save in Bitcoin and you invest into Bitcoin startups or even early stage startups. Like these are two different buckets. It's not one or the other. If somebody doesn't have Bitcoin, I would never even feel comfortable with them joining and investing. They need to buy Bitcoin first, of course, and then maybe later start to think about allocating some percentage of their money into some of these early stage startups. So I think it's super fun. I think that by having your deal flow kind of dialed in, you're always on the tip of the sphere for everything that's going on in the world. Okay. Even if you're not investing, but if you're in some really, really smart, good, awesome VC syndicates, you're seeing, you're seeing everything that happened in restaurant tech. You had the first look at it, right? Before sort of DoorDash and all these things were like normal. You saw when they started, when they all sort of started, or, the buy now, pay later, or the robotic lawn mowers, or, everything that's happening in the world, you get a front row seat at technology, whether it's sort of, rare earth mining from satellites in space, or even space exploration. There's a lot of SpaceX competitors out there, that are doing other things too. So if you like technology and you like seeing really cool stuff that people all over the world are building and have the opportunity to maybe invest small amounts in these companies, knowing all the risks and all that jazz. I just think it's a really fun hobby. I just think it's one of the most exciting, coolest things that you can spend your time doing.
I'm glad that you brought up Fold, because that is the first true Bitcoin company to go public, to have an IPO. And then there's also a number that have been acquired too. But I mean, the other side of the coin that I love about what you're doing is it also provides founders with the ability to raise capital to create their companies. So venture capital is hard at the early stage. And I think it's especially hard for Bitcoin companies, not because I think a lot of the venture capitalists don't understand the technology promise of Bitcoin, just like many did not understand the technology promise of AI, or it was just hard to understand at first. And now, of course, everybody's on that bandwagon. But there was also the trend toward tokenization for anything involved with digital assets and quote unquote Web3. And so they thought, well, why don't you issue a token for your company? And most pure Bitcoin companies won't go that route because they're based on the fundamentals of Bitcoin versus other cryptos. But you are providing a really important service and great service for the companies to be able to raise funding to take it to the next level. So can you talk about how the founders approach you and how they become one of the deals that are featured in Lightning Ventures or Thunder Funder? Like how does that relationship come about? And so for founders that are out there listening, how do they reach you to get on to get vetted and listed?
So both crowdfunding and raising from a syndicate, and there are many different types of investor groups. Okay, there might be the Miami tech investors, or maybe the Tel Aviv investors that maybe they focus on a certain geography or certain area, and you can just picture it as a group of say 50 people who get together on the third Friday of the month, and maybe you bring in a deal, and you're like, hey, I just did 3 calls with this founder. He's building the best widget in the world. Okay. This is awesome. And you present that deal to that group of 50 or so people. And maybe if you get enough interest, you'll start to pool the capital from that group together to make maybe a $150,000 investment, right? If there are 50 people in that group and they all invest $3,000, then you collectively as a group have made that investment. So that's kind of like how they work. Maybe the person who brings in the deal gets a little bit of a bonus, or however kind of they're structured. So it's a super powerful way for a founder to access some of that early capital when they need it, maybe to make their first 1 or 2 big hires, or to get that MVP out the door, or to just get a little bit of cashola in the bank so that they can, take the next step. So the syndicate model is great, but remember, it's all about how the overall market is. So before, things were pretty loose, where maybe it's pre-product. They could raise a few $100,000 or even $1 million fairly easily without actually having the work done. We haven't been in that market for quite a while, but it is definitely powerful to ship that money to the founder. On the Reg CF side of things, it's kind of the same way. Where it's an easy way to spin up a deal and maybe you raise $100,000, and you can go back and start to build. And, it's not a donation, right? These are investors. They're investing in you not only because they support you and all, but it's not like you're saving the manatees. You ultimately have to deal with them in one way or another. So it's definitely powerful for a founder to be able to raise from both sides of these networks. It's just kind of about what's a better fit and what makes more sense. For example, on the Reg CF side, you have to file something that's called a Form C, which is, depending on where your company's at, a 25 to 50 page document of your financials, whether that, that depending on how much you raise, does it need an audit? Does it not need an audit? Does it need a review? Did a CPA have to look it over? But you have to ultimately have, your Form C it's public. It's in the SEC's website. You can look up, one of the companies that's doing a Reg CF offering. And that's not a good fit for every company. Maybe there's some companies who don't want that information out there in the public space, and they don't really want balance sheets or anything out there. So, the public side of things, that is a trade-off, and maybe that wouldn't be a good fit for them. So they want to stay on the private side. The other thing is, kind of all your information is out there. There's a lot of information out there for your business. So that might not work. Maybe an early stage company who doesn't really have much to think about, because maybe a lot of those numbers are zeros on their income statement. They don't really have anything to lose, and they like the idea from raising from anyone. So, I think all these websites, including ours, have a way that you can click on the pitch us, sort of submit. And, it's the same few questions, a lot of places that you go. And those questions are good exercises. We're doing them right now for something that we're working on. But, what problem are you solving, and all of this good stuff, and identifying competitors and kind of going through the motions. And then we would do a couple of calls with a founder, and then we would start to prepare the deal. And we would take as much information as we can. Maybe they have a deal room. I mean, great tips for founders is to have a very well organized deal room, or at least have an easily shareable link that has kind of all your information in there. Maybe a short executive summary, maybe a pitch deck. Maybe there's some projections. Maybe there's a certificate of incorporation or a couple of other things. But at the earliest stages, companies don't really have too much to have in their deal room. And then we would produce like a deal memo where we would write why we like this company and why we're investing our own money in this company. And then we would send that out to everyone and spin the wheel of fortune and see how we do. Sometimes we'll host an investor call. Sometimes it's a private call if the company's not really too comfortable with having something that's on YouTube or whatever. Sometimes people in the group submit questions that we have answered by the founder. And that's pretty much how that goes. With Thunder Funder, it takes a little bit more. It's a little bit harder to get a deal up. There's a certain amount of days that you have to wait after you do something, after you submit the Form C via the Edgar tool to the SEC. You have to wait 21 days. And, there's a little bit, and ironically, it's 21. It takes a little bit longer. But when the market's supportive with the syndicate model, I mean, we've had start to finish 10 days, like shipping a founder $250,000. And that was just and that was done. From the day we decided, hey, we're gonna invest and do this, to preparing the deal, to shipping it out to our people, to the funds clearing, and to us wiring and being done. So we were known for speed when the market supports it, and it can be very quick. That's another difference between the sort of Reg D accredited investor side versus the crowdfunding side. We're just getting ready to close our first deal. March 31st is the deadline for JOLTS. We actually have not closed a successful deal on Thunder Funder just yet. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, it's shaping up to be an interesting first case study for you guys, Maz. I mean, Jolts was in the spotlight recently with that big Tether announcement moving over to the Lightning Network, and I believe Jolts is providing some of that infrastructure.
We like Jolts. We like Ian and Jolts and the team there. We think they're great. They've been on the podcast.
Yeah, love what they're working on. And speaking to the infrastructure, and there can be so many different sectors of the Bitcoin, ecosystem that are investable at. I know with Thunder Funder, you're just getting going, but Lightning Ventures, can you give us an idea of what you guys invest in? I mean, are you kind of sector agnostic, just as long as it's building on the Bitcoin protocol, you're open to anything, or are there certain areas of particular interest more than others?
So definitely Bitcoin only, and Bitcoin is the focus. Now, after the fact, if a company decides to add Ethereum or something else to their wallet, that's really out of our control, and we could just cheer them on, and I hope they do great. But what we found is that anyone who even entertains that idea, it's usually like less than 10% of their revenue when it really comes down to it. So, I mean, we found that most companies, from being a Bitcoin only and embracing that, actually get a lot more goodwill and mileage than they would by, adding Solana or something like that, which is, it's not really gonna make too much of a difference. So it's all things Bitcoin. We haven't really done much with mining. The mining just got decimated. We closed deals all through this bear market, which was kind of a miracle that we were able to, hit our minimums and continually close deals. We had a few that didn't, because you do have to raise a certain amount of money, or else, unfortunately, the deal can't close because there's SPV fees and all of these other things. But the few deals that we tried to do with mining, they just didn't really have they just didn't have the interest. So we don't have much. I mean, we co-syndicated a deal in Blockstream. I invested in Blockstream personally. I guess you could call them a mining company. There's certainly a mining component there. We co-syndicated Ocean. It was called Mummelin back then. But that's pretty much it on the mining front. So love it. I mean, it's great, but we just haven't done much in that area. And then you also get to know what their flavor is. Somebody with like flared natural gas in the middle of the Nevada desert and like a shipping container and filled with S9s. That's just not really my style. I just don't really know much about that. It's just like not really for me. But maybe like a hash rate marketplace. I mean, I love that, in the hosting business and lots of other parts of mining. So you get to know like what people are really interested in. We did make one investment into an ordinals company. I managed to escape all of the death threats at that point in time. The company's actually doing very well, but we put in the memo, hey guys, listen, this is it as far as ordinals go. I don't have any ordinals. I never had one, but this is like the pick and shovel play. So if you want exposure to this space, this is the one. And we actually did 2 very good syndicates for that company. So not really much of the whole sort of tokens on Bitcoin and earn 20% APY on this other sort of Bitcoin. We don't have any of that. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand those projects. That's very likely too. But as soon as we kind of hear token or any of that stuff, we really don't don't do too much with it. But hey, that's just our, that's just what we're doing, right? I know there's a lot of people that invest in all that stuff and they're doing great, and God bless them, but you probably just shouldn't invest in what you don't understand. And I certainly don't understand how you can make 30% APY on some staked Bitcoin token. So that's kind of that. But look, I love the stuff that bridges the traditional finance with Bitcoin. Stuff like Fold, the rewards companies, the Sats back type of deals. I love the lending stuff. I know we just came out of this whole terrible time, but lending is going to be big. It's going to be big with Bitcoin. So look, I love a lot of that traditional stuff. The exchanges, right? Boring, but we're in so many of them all over the world, right? Whether it's BIPA in Brazil or Relay in Europe, Strike, here in the US, I mean, Beaver Bitcoin in Canada, Amber in Australia. I mean, we're just in so many of those, and they're all kind of having record months right now. So it's not really the most exciting sort of, stuff, but I love those type of businesses. But we are all things Bitcoin. It's not just about the Lightning Network. A lot of people get confused with Lightning Ventures. They think we're only investing in Lightning projects. I mean, I think that Lightning is the most important thing because I think that's where it's going, but that's not just the only part of what we're focused on.
It feels like you get a lot of feedback on your deals that you present to the community, and I want to just take a minute and talk about the importance of community on your platforms. How active are they, or do you see any kind of parallel between the active engagement of the community members toward a deal and the success of a deal? Does that kind of fuel the increase in the investments for a particular deal? And how do founders engage with the community? Can they engage directly? Are they on the platform just talking to people, or what? And how do you encourage more people kind of getting involved and sharing their opinion and their thoughts?
It's something that would be nice if I could figure it out. And I think everyone struggles with community because it's really hard. And there's etiquette with accredited investors in this world. And if somebody, isn't, I mean, there's zero tolerance for leaks of information and breaches. It's not that there's the most sensitive information, out there, but certainly can't be shared. And, if somebody breaches that, which thankfully has not happened, none that I know of, then we would have to remove them. And, there's this kind of funny meme where it's like a guy looking out the window and it says, that angel investor who invested $1,000 in your company watching your every move, and there's definitely information sort of rights and privileges based on how much that person wants to invest. So if somebody wanted to invest, $25,000 or more into a company, they should absolutely do, whether that's through Lightning Ventures or not, they should absolutely do that call with the founder, ask their own questions, and I would be very supportive of that. It's hard because you have a Telegram channel and you want everyone to be respectful. You don't want to bash a founder in there. You don't want to say a bunch of things like that. And I wouldn't put up with it either. But it's a private Telegram channel. I mean, what else are you gonna do? We're actually looking for a CEO for Thunder Funder. So I just put the job posting on Bitcoiner Jobs today. I hope we find an all-star who can really focus on just developing that community. Because Thunder Funder has like a messaging feature built in. Granted, it's still just a web app. We don't have a mobile app. But there's a lot that we could do with the community there, especially. Right. And then it's, do we get off of Telegram? And now everyone hates it. Telegram's a disaster too, by the way, but a lot of people struggle with this. They have abandoned Slack sort of groups that aren't very active, and community is really hard. And, we're just trying our best, and it's something that can be improved. And hopefully the new CEO of Thunder Funder, can really emphasize that community, and maybe do weekly calls where anyone can kind of sit in and ask questions about investing, or maybe there's founders on there. Community is a whole specialized, I don't know anyone who's like got community like fully dialed in, you know? Maybe you do.
No, I mean, well, it's certainly, I think, one of the toughest challenges in this overflow of information environment as well, right? I mean, I think we've all experienced the good and bad of technology as well in that regard. That it's hard. I mean, you got to kind of pick and choose which platforms or newsletters or online communities or in-person communities you're a part of, because we're just inundated with information every single day, right? So I mean I certainly see that challenge in the community aspect, but I'm very glad that you guys are doing your part with both of these investment vehicles, Maz. I mean, there's definitely a gap there in private markets between demand and availability of the private sector investments, and being able to lower those barriers. Yeah, there's other considerations, and there's things to keep in mind, of course, and uncertainties, but it sounds like you guys are doing a very good job at being very transparent with both sides, the founder and the investor community. And we are definitely looking forward to seeing a lot more of the companies that you're able to support and some of the results a little farther down the line, right? I mean, we're not there yet where we're seeing a lot of the success stories, exits, IPOs, but I think they're going to creep up a lot quicker than people think.
It'll be nice to see what happens once things enter that kind of harvest season. And maybe there's a lot of M&A activity that picks up, and will there be a lot of consolidation with some of these Bitcoin exchanges or in this space together? But mainly, if you can manage expectations, which I really try to do, because, if you talk to any founder, and I literally just experienced this, putting together a small round for what I'm doing, we raised a little bit of capital, and just VCs just telling you one thing and then not doing it. And I think that it's almost impossible for that to never happen in the VC land. I don't think it's possible for it to never happen. But just trying to manage expectations if we're doing a syndicate deal of how the market is right now, and like, you should expect this, right? Let's try to get here, and if we get here, that's great. You know what I mean? But just managing expectations. Same with Thunder Funder. It's a new portal. The regulations are so absurd for what we have to deal with as far as what we can say, can't say. I mean, I just hope Trump just cuts this whole thing and just gets this whole thing, just rip it apart, because we can't even share like the Jolts news. The Jolts had the biggest company defining news in El Salvador, where I first met Lynn in person, and we can't even share it with the network. Like, we can't. And we did our like check-in call with FINRA, and they're like, tell us some of your struggles. It's like, dude, I can't even email everyone on our platform and just say, did you see this news? Here's 20 links from like Yahoo News on down. Not my editorial comment, not my opinion, no rocket ship emoji. Like, how do we even help me? And it's very challenging. So we're just trying to figure out all the creative ways that we can do that.
Yeah, I think your the expression, the frustration you expressed at the very beginning is just so spot on. It's that government regulations are protecting people from investing, but not the wealthy investors, but just the individuals. Yet they can go to Vegas and do whatever they want. They can, I mean, it's just and there are people in the Bitcoin space who know so much about this technology, probably could know circles around, a traditional VC investor who hasn't taken the time to understand Bitcoin. So they could look at the company and really understand why this is going to be a benefit to advancing financial transparency, reducing fees in traditional finance, and and just providing a better global financial experience. So yeah, it's a shame that the regs exist. And thank you from the community for spending the time and money and effort to provide a platform that more people can be a part of, both on the investing side and the funding side. I know we're getting close to the hour, but I have one question I just wanted to ask you. As somebody who's been involved in angel investing and, been a part of some of these super successful and unsuccessful angel investments, and then now going into Bitcoin, what technologies? We won't ask you to pick favorites in terms of company specifics, but any trends in Bitcoin technology or Bitcoin companies that you personally are especially excited about?
Well, before there really wasn't too much that you could invest in. And now Bitcoin has kind of entered nearly everywhere, whether it's ad tech or mobile or privacy, just kind of, or even, crowd health when they came out, it was in the healthcare space. Even that company Daylight Computer, they have the tablet there that's, it has no blue light. They're adding a Bitcoin component to what they're doing. So, it's kind of creeping into every industry. And honestly, what I'm really excited about is finally our US Bitcoin startups can start to operate in a non-hostile environment. It was just so difficult to do anything. If you wanted to mix sort of your basic, routing and account number to something that even has anything to do with Bitcoin, it was like nearly impossible. I mean, some companies couldn't even get an operating account if they were a Bitcoin company. For their perfectly legitimate company, they just could not operate in any way. And it's just like we're just starting to see it now, where a lot of our kind of starting US Bitcoin exchanges, wallets, sort of financial products are just now able to, hey, we have 3 banks that are now finally interested. 2 of them look great. It's like those sort of partnerships were like impossible under Biden. It was just so brutal. And, living through that for them and not dying. If you were a Bitcoin startup who got through that and didn't die, you're really in great shape. I like a lot of the boring stuff. I think nearly every one of our portfolio companies, we've had a few that have struggled, but they're all alive, which is the most important part. If you're in the business of buying and selling Bitcoin right now, you're probably having record months. If you're not, it can be very challenging because right now everyone just wants more Bitcoin. And this is kind of what we're going through as, what I do with demand varying, okay, where people want more Bitcoin. I get it. I understand it. But they don't want to buy collectibles, right? I love scarcity. They're still doing tremendously, but just caught up the other day, for example. They don't want art as much, right? They're still doing auctions every week and they're doing great and whatever. But when you put it on a chart with how they were doing during sort of peaks of bull markets, it's not the same. So something like Geyser, I mean, people love to donate, but do they really donate right now more at a time when everyone just wants more Bitcoin? And that's sort of the challenge is if you're not selling, do people want to invest in Bitcoin startups right now? Or do they want more Bitcoin? So we're still at that kind of period. There's like a balance, and it's a lagging indicator to where, and it's not just like a certain number. Oh, when it gets back above 100, it's going to change, because it takes a while. The wealth effect, the IPO market opening up again, interest rates maybe coming down. A lot of things need to happen for people to really feel comfortable and to really start investing. And there was a point in time where it was the opposite way, where people were borrowing against their Bitcoin to invest in Bitcoin startups and all of these other things. Like it goes the other way as well. And if we weren't focused on Bitcoin, it would probably be a lot easier because every person in our group is benchmarking everything that they do against Bitcoin. If we were just in AI, or something else, people wouldn't really be thinking, well, do I want to invest in this really cool new AI startup or do I want to buy $5,000 of Bitcoin? Because that's not in their face all day. But that's like what we specialize in. That's what we do. So it even makes it a little bit more challenging. The other thing is to see markups in your portfolio takes a long time. So maybe something like Relay, for example, in Europe, we've probably 5x or 6x their valuation based on where we first invested. And it takes a while to get that into the LP's head, when they're seeing it in the account. Like, it's still on paper, it's not necessarily real. Anything can happen. So we have some portfolio companies with true real markups that are doing phenomenal, but it's hard to feel it. It takes a while for that. So just waiting for that to catch up.
Well, thanks for your focus on the sector, and democratizing that access that we, were able to cover in this hour. We didn't get into some other interesting talking points that we would have loved to cover. Right now that you were just kind of mentioning the blessing and curse of having Bitcoin as a kind of hurdle rate, and that mentality just creates so many new dynamics, right? Both from a founder's perspective on how you build company and how you deploy resources, to an investor's perspective as well, because they're kind of benchmarking around that. And there's so many interesting themes that, Lynn and I have been covering with, how do you incorporate Bitcoin as a treasury asset? And there's many aspects to this conversation that we would have loved to, expand more on, Mike, but maybe we can do that in a further episode. We'd love to get you back on.
I was going to say is, I knew when we started the conversation that we had so much to talk about, but there are an increasing number of Bitcoin companies, but there are very few funds and vehicles like your platforms that focus on Bitcoin only companies. So we want to make this a regular talk and have you back on regularly to kind of check in, see how things are doing, see how the platform's evolving, see what deals you're seeing that are exciting. So this will just be the first of many future conversations that we look forward to, Mike.
Great. And I would love to talk about that Bitcoin corporate treasury, both for Bitcoin startups in general, and even my own personal experience with that now, that people might be able to learn from. And how we've degened our corporate treasury into Bitcoin only. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of fun things to unpack. I hope you all have me back. And if you guys or anyone that is interested in that Thunder Funder CEO position, because I think both of you guys would be fantastic, but you probably got more important things to do. Please keep that in mind.
We want to give a shout out. We'll have links in the show notes. So if there's a link to the position, we can add that in. And then also, I know that, we're not actually, you had mentioned that you're doing a fundraise. So I'm just going to put this out there. If somebody is interested in learning more about that opportunity, to contact you. So we'll have your contact information in there too.
Yeah, I hope that I can send you all the links and you can put a few below. But if you're a founder or if you're building something and you're looking for ways to raise money, please fill out the forms. At least we'll get it in the queue and in our database and on our radar. And, even if it doesn't lead to funding, it might lead to intros to portfolio companies or something that's really good for what you're building right now. If you're an investor and thinking, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more, or, maybe even just get in the flow of what is going on, I hope you sign up and take a look at what we're doing and, invest or not invest. And you might find your next career jump, just by being in there. So that's the best thing, is to just join the network and see where it goes.
Well, we appreciate the time, Mike. And, where can people find you personally? Where's the best place to reach out? Are there any maybe speaking engagements that you'll be at? Any conferences coming up?
So, I'm trying to dial it back on the conferences. I think that, Vegas is going to be great, in May. So certainly there. And, we're going to do a killer Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm working out the details right now, but the Vegas Nakamoto, I'm hoping is going to be epic. Usually every year, at least the past 2 years, we went to, BTC Prague, which was a phenomenally run event. It was awesome. Baltic Honey Badger, I've been twice, is an amazing event in Riga that's killer every year. Riga is an amazing city. That's one of the best parts about Bitcoin, right? It brings you to places that you never even think of. I can almost promise you I'd never make it to Riga in this life if it wasn't for that conference. Um, and my wife actually works for Bitcoin Magazine, so I know that they have the Hong Kong conference coming up in August. So maybe I can tag along and be a plus one over there. So nothing in the immediate next 2 months though. Probably not until May. And I guess ltng.ventures or thunderfunder.com, and you can click one of those buttons and you find me on there somewhere. And look forward to hearing from y'all.
Thanks again so much. We really appreciate your time and all that you do for the ecosystem.
Thank you, Lynn and Israel. It was great chatting with you, and I have a feeling that we could have chatted for a long time and bored the hell out of everybody, but maybe we'll save some of that.
We'll bookmark it for next time. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the Build with Bitcoin podcast. If you found benefit in what you heard in this episode, we'd truly appreciate it if you would like, share, or leave a comment on whichever platform you're listening, as this helps others find us, which is especially important for a new podcast. And as a reminder, our content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not to be considered investment advice or a recommendation to invest in any company or asset mentioned in the podcast. Build with Bitcoin is a proud affiliate partner of River, a full-service, 100% reserve custody, Bitcoin-only financial services company. For your next Bitcoin purchase, use our exclusive link, partner.river.com/buildwithbitcoin. Thank you sincerely for being a part of the Build with Bitcoin community.